Okay, welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the break and in the exhibitor showcase and in the exhibitor hall over there. We're going to go ahead and just jump right back in now into some more fantastic content. We're going to have a panel discussion with Daniel Kimble from Resonance Executive Coaching. We're going to have a Svetlana Yedreshtyn from Invesco and Brian Steinberg from Kemper. They're going to be talking to us today about the future of executive development. And rather than taking up a bunch of content time with me doing the introductions, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to the moderator, Daniel, so he can get this rolling. So Daniel, feel free, go ahead and take it away.
There we go. Can you hear me now? All right. Welcome, everybody. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. I want to get into some depth here with our conversation. So I want to just jump right in. But first, if we could start with some brief intros. Svetlana, if you wouldn't mind starting with introduction of yourself and your organization and what you do. And then Brian, you can follow.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Svetlana Yedreshtyn. I'm a director with Invesco. We are a global asset management firm, about 8,000 employees. I am based out of our New York City office, currently working from home in Staten Island. And my mission at Invesco is to help implement a much more agile and progressive approach to performance management. I also do a lot of work in the executive development, executive coaching space, as well as a variety of other L&D initiatives.
Great. Thank you. How about you, Brian?
I'm the Director of Leadership Development for Kemper Insurance. We're a non-standard insurer working in all 50 states. I'm based in Chicago. My home office is in the northwest suburbs, and I work in leadership development at all levels from executive all the way to frontline leader. And we also do a lot of work around coaching and assessment.
Great, thank you. So as we all know, lots of things have changed in 2020. I want to jump right into our first conversation point, which is around emotional intelligence and how that's shifted in 2020. I've heard from a lot of our clients and customers that the need and the interest level has shifted a lot, but I'd love to hear from the panel as far as what you've seen within your organizations for EQ skills, the needs changing and the desire changing, et cetera. What have you seen so far this year?
So I can start off. That's a great question. I think EQ is one of those things that is always important for leaders, and it seems like there's a heightened importance now on everything from listening to what our employees are telling us, reading between the lines, being connected and checking in on how they're doing. That social emotional intelligence becomes absolutely critical. Agility, being able to pivot and embrace change and lean into it, are becoming more and more important, because we are in an ever-evolving world. VUCA, change is a constant, change is the norm, and leaders really need to be able to adjust to that and to bring their folks along with them.
I'm guessing you've seen an increased interest level within the organization, given the VUCA reality we're in. Is that accurate to assume?
It is, yeah. There's more interest, there's more need, and we're doing a lot more to support leaders in that space.
Great, thank you. How about you, Brian? What's happening within your organization?
Yeah, I would say not just increased interest, but far more importantly, an increased willingness, where leaders may have felt that they had the emotional intelligence. Now we're seeing some self-awareness that they really don't have the depth that they need, especially in an environment that is putting so much pressure on the employee base. And so they're leaning into some discomfort and starting to stretch themselves.
So at some level, there's been interest level or openness to it and recognizing the importance, but I think people are recognizing more of their awareness around it is increasing to where they're seeing some of the limitations and seeing how that's playing out in this VUCA environment is what I'm hearing from you.
Yes, absolutely.
What benefits do you think the organization begins to experience as leaders get better at emotional intelligence? What are you seeing as far as outcomes go?
So I'll jump in there. I think that the number one thing is the relationship between leader and employee is getting stronger. It's leading to better conversations. It's leading to better relationships. They're starting to think more holistically both about the work and the outcomes, but also about them as people. And I think some of this is stemming from the pressure that the leaders are under working in this, and that has generated this awareness.
Great, thank you.
I would echo that. I would say that I think from an organizational perspective, there's a greater likelihood of us achieving our objectives if everyone's aligned and working together, collaborating and talking about where they're getting stuck or what's getting in the way, and managers can then work as a buffer or remove some of those obstacles. I think from another perspective, a more humanistic perspective, employees don't leave jobs, they leave managers, they leave bosses. And so if our bosses are demonstrating, if our leaders are demonstrating a heightened sense of EQ, the likelihood of turnover goes down, likelihood of burnout goes down, likelihood of employees being really engaged and putting in that discretionary effort goes up. And it becomes more of a conversation as to what's going on, what are some new and novel and innovative ideas for how to tackle issues, where am I stuck and I need a mental health day because today I'm not at my best. And it's that conversation that really helps improve things all around.
Yeah, thanks for that. And one of my thoughts about this right now is that in this remote world that we find ourselves in, the need is even stronger. That need for empathy, listening, connection, like through a virtual connection as we are all on today. It's not the same as face-to-face. We are wired for face-to-face contact to a certain extent. And the lack of that leadership competency, I think, becomes more important. What are you seeing as far as how the remote world is playing into this, and what benefits are you seeing as far as the outcomes related specifically to working remotely with all of our teams at home, more or less?
So, Brian, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm seeing, while the lines between home and work are blurring, I'm starting to see leaders pushing back with their employees and telling them to disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to see better behaviors in terms of, I don't want to say drawing a line, but when I hear, directors talking about, I used to have a 2-hour round trip commute, and for myself, I had a 3. So, something that resonates with me. Now I'm taking that time and I'm putting it into my work, but I'm chunking it out. And so if I step away from my desk from 2 to 3 and play with my kids or walk my dog, that's okay. And encouraging their employees to do the same.
Yeah, I think you said in our prep conversation, we're kind of all living in each other's living rooms to a certain extent because of the casual nature that's come with this. But at the same time, I'm hearing most of us are working a lot harder than ever. And as you touched on, the lines between personal and professional are more blurred than they've ever been. What do you want to comment there on, Svetlana?
I agree. I joke that our office is just a couple footsteps away from our kitchen or our living room or our bedroom. And so we don't have a really long commute anymore. So that is a beautiful thing. In some ways, you get a little bit more rest. You get to walk the dog, you get to work out or read a book, or it also makes it much harder to create that work-life boundary. I wrote an article about how we've lost our transitional time. We've lost our time to decompress from a really hard work day sometimes and get ready for what may await us at home, which is our next shift. Or we've lost our time to mentally gear ourselves up for a day at work and all the things that are coming and start to prioritize things in our own mind. So it becomes more challenging in a lot of ways. Folks are putting in more hours. And so they're getting stressed. It's very easy for me to finish off dinner, throw the dishes in the dishwasher, and then come back to my computer and do another hour or two rather than some other activity. So really defining those boundaries to minimize the chances of burnout becomes even more critical. I think for managers, going back to the original question you asked, it's heightened and increased and accelerated the need for them to manage effectively remotely. For those who are used to having all in-person meetings and seeing what their people were doing, when they were working, when they weren't, I think for some it creates a likelihood or increases the chances of them wanting to micromanage. And so how do you help managers learn to manage differently and trust and look at outcomes and create different ways of checking in on things to make sure they're feeling comfortable and things are moving, but they're empowering and developing their folks at the same time?
Right. I'm curious to hear, as far as what are you seeing that's working well to help leaders get better at EQ and some of the things we're talking about? What are some of the programs or other initiatives you have underway that you've seen work well so far to address some of these needs.
So I can, or Brian, go ahead.
No, please.
So we're doing a couple of things. One, we've implemented Degreed, which is a wonderful resource and online platform for curating learning, self-paced micro-learning, and we're loading in lots of content. That's one. Two, we've created a lot of one-page reference guides on resilience, on change management, on inspiring and empowering team, encouraging them to maximize their productivity at home, as well as prevent burnout. We're pushing out a weekly manager tip of the day. So we're trying to do a lot from a micro-learning perspective to really make sure we're supporting leaders, including agility, mindfulness, and resilience training. We're trying to think about it in a couple different ways.
Right. Brian?
Yeah, and we're doing some of the similar things. We have a series that we refer to as Working Optimally. We do this for employees. We do a manager version as well, and it's curated online content around productivity, around communication, and around stress and stress management. And so for every employee version, we have a manager and a leader version that helps them towards team effectiveness, towards productivity, towards driving the organizational goals and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Since we touched on it, I want to go deeper into this other topic, which is, as we said, people are working harder than ever for the most part, and the lines between personal and professional are so blurred, like probably more than they've ever been. Can easily lead to burnout. There's the always on mentality, like somebody might be tempted. They woke up in the middle of the night thinking about something at work. I'll just send this quick email while it's on my mind. Not necessarily thinking about the impact of a 2 a.m. email on somebody else and implying that everybody should be working 24/7. What are you seeing as far as that? And what are you doing to help leaders do better when it comes to managing their energy and taking their downtime when they need it so that they can emphasize the personal in ways that need to be emphasized right now with the stress everybody's experiencing, but also come back to work that much more fresh, that much more effective because they had a little bit of downtime. What are you seeing as far as the impacts of the situation, Rand, and what are you doing to try to address it for leaders?
Good, Brian, go ahead.
I saw a cartoon yesterday that I think really hits at this. I can't relax because I'm too busy thinking about all the things that are stressing me out. And so having conversations with leaders around exactly those topics. What is it that's keeping you up at night? What are the things that you're sending emails at 2 o'clock in the morning? A terrible habit that encourages employees to follow bad habits. And getting them to think mindfully about the practices that they're setting in place and the behaviors they're demonstrating. And I mentioned this during our prep call, even doing things like getting them to use the scheduling tools in Outlook so that if they at 2 o'clock in the morning, they just have to get this email out of their head and on, into an electronic format and send it, but schedule it so that it goes Monday at 7 a.m. or something so that employees don't realize they've been working at 2 o'clock on a Saturday.
Right. Svetlana?
I think that's such a great recommendation because oftentimes we'll get emails even on a Thursday at 8 o'clock or Saturday at 11. That's when the leader has time to catch up on things. And then we feel the sense of responsiveness or obligation that we need to jump on that. And it doesn't create a great culture because it feels like a 7-day work week as opposed to a really full 5 days as is. So that's such a great tip. What we're seeing, what we're doing, we're really trying to encourage people to take time off. For the holidays, over the summer, a lot of folks were not able to travel or do the things that they normally would, especially at the start of the pandemic. There was a lot that people were adjusting to, especially with kids at home who were doing remote schooling and struggling as well. Now 2 spouses or parents are home. So there's a lot that's going on that folks are dealing with. So we've been seeing heightened levels of anxiety and stress. What we've been trying to do is encourage people to take time off, either a staycation, or encouraging folks to take a day off every other week, take an afternoon off, block off a couple of hours for whatever you need. We've started to do walking meetings. So I grab a pad and I go outside, and for 45 minutes or 55 minutes, I have a call with my leader or my team while I'm enjoying the fresh outdoors and actual sunlight during the day while it's still warm out. So little things like that, encouraging folks to watch when they're sending those emails. and trying to be more humanistic. To Brian's point about the living room and our office are not so far apart, we bring kids onto calls. I bring my 8-year-old and have her say hi to everyone, and she'll tell them about the homework assignment or what fun things she's doing. So we're trying to humanize things a little bit more to make it a little less stressful.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I mean, how many of us are sitting in front of a screen pretty much all day long, and even longer days than usual? Because again, the transition time of commuting for many of us is gone, and many of us have filled that time in with more work. Some of the things I'm hearing from clients too is to take that, what used to be that commute time, and instead mindfully create a transition time. Give yourself maybe half an hour in the morning to gear up, of alone time to really gear up and transition into your workday. As you're transitioning out of your workday, or at least taking some downtime before you maybe go back to work later in the day, at least give yourself the time to wind down from it and kind of process and jot down some things. If you got some thoughts about things that were not quite resolved that day that are still on your mind, if you jot it down in some way, get it out of your mind and onto paper, that can help you let go of it, at least for the rest of the evening. I'm curious, like, what are you seeing in terms of, how do you know that we're being successful at some of these initiatives? How do you know that, are you getting feedback from executives that it's working? How are you kind of, what are you observing or measuring in terms of knowing that this is working?
So I think informal feedback, hearing from HR business partners in terms of complaints or concerns. We've been running a survey just about every month since the pandemic started, where we're looking at numbers and trends and how our people are doing. So looking at metrics like that. And it takes a while because the challenges evolve over time. And so our numbers reflect that. But we're looking at both the quantitative and the qualitative and trying to see how are folks feeling and get a sense of that sentiment throughout the organization.
Right. Brian?
Yeah, we are not doing a lot of formal measurement, but we are having HR business partners talk to employees of targeted groups. So if we've done something with a group of leaders, then having conversations to gather anecdotal, behaviors that have been very positive. We're also seeing more of an uptick of use of resources. So when we do a working optimally session, and then we send out follow-up resources, the volume and speed of people attacking and using those resources has been really good. We're working on a social approach to learning as well. We're not there from a technology standpoint, but I think we're going to see a lot of co-sharing and collaboration when we launch that, just based on the things that I'm hearing in the field.
I'm curious to hear more, if you're willing to share, about the Working Optimally program, just at a high level. What components are included? Because one of our topics we're going to get to is working, essentially what I call working smarter, not harder, and how easy it is to get caught up in the day-to-day and not step back and really focus on the most strategic things. But what's included in that program, just high level, big picture?
Sure. So initially we started, the title was going to be Working Optimally in a Changing Environment. And we were going to focus very kind of narrowly on this environment, pandemic, et cetera, and decided that we were going to just drop the back half, and that whatever the change was going on, we could tackle that. So from an online learning platform, we use Skillsoft Percipio. So we target specific courses, and right now a big topic for leaders is prioritization. Getting people to stop doing things that have low value, even if they may feel like urgent tasks, but if they're not driving goals, why are we doing them? Or why are we doing them right now? Also thinking about our deadlines. How many deadlines do we have that are really mission critical versus just, we've drawn a line that says this is the date, and do we need to go back and reevaluate these? So we recommend these courses that people take, and then they come into an open forum discussion. It's a facilitated discussion, either somebody on my team or one of our HR business partners run. We limit them to a max of 30 people. and we get people to turn their cameras on and turn their mics on, and then use the raise hand functionality, and we call people and they just share what's working for them. And so, if we're talking about stress reduction and somebody wants to talk about, their yoga sun salute, and point people to a video, that's great. And if they are talking about business metrics and how to refine and think about them differently, different conversations, obviously, that's great too. But the idea is that we know we don't know everything. But by getting 30 people into a virtual room and letting them have a conversation, first of all, everyone starts to feel like, wow, it's not just me.
Right.
And they build a network that maybe they didn't have before, because we're running these across the enterprise rather than within our typical business silos.
Thank
Brian,
you.
just to jump in on that, there's so much to be said for that validation component. I've run so many leadership programs, and as much as they love the content, the speakers, the exercises, the assessments, the simulations, what they love most is the interaction with each other.
Yep.
And hearing about each other's challenges and the best practices and things they've tried that have gone well or haven't. So that conversation, that sense of community is so powerful and impactful for these leaders.
Agreed. And when I
Yeah.
get an instant message or an email from somebody that says, I was in your session last week and I ran into this problem and I reached out to Tom and Tom had this great suggestion that worked for me. Like,
Victory.
you're
Yeah.
doing my job for me and I love it.
One of the things that I aim for is to, and it's aspirational for the most part, but aim to drive myself out of business by being so effective at what we do that it's not needed anymore. So that's a way that I try to think about it.
Agreed.
Let's talk about specifically for yourselves and your teams, because you, of course, are both teaching others how to do this better as far as working optimally and not being strategic, et cetera, which we'll get to in a second. But what are you seeing in your teams as far as for yourself, focusing on not avoiding burnout, doing the right things, taking the downtime, modeling the right behaviors, in addition to teaching the entire organization to do the right things as far as taking care of themselves and taking care of their teams and their families and remote school and everything else that's going on? How are you managing that within yourself, with your own life, first of all, and then within your team directly? Brian, you want to start?
Sure. So we just added a couple of folks to my team, and we refer to ourselves as the TMTMT, the Tiny Mighty Talent Management Team, because we are a small group, and we do a lot of our work through our HR business partners and our field learning folks. But we've started doing virtual happy hours for the team in the, just maybe, end the day a little bit early, get on at 4:15 and spend an hour and just, talk about our families and our kids and our dogs and whatever's going on. My colleague whose son just accidentally dropped a 1-gallon can of paint in the trunk of their brand new car. And the frustration involved there. Doing things like covering for each other far more than we have in the past. Just, hey, this has come up and I'm not at my best. Can you take this on? And some cases that's not possible. Our boss has been really good about making sure that we're disconnected. He does not email us in the middle of the night or across the weekend. If something urgent comes up, which does happen. Sunday a week ago, I got a Teams message from him because he knows I've got it on my phone and it'll pop up as something he needed for the CHRO for Monday. Okay, great. It's urgent. Let's get it done. But for the most part, we just don't do that. And then encouraging each other to take that time away or even just get up and go stretch. We do a lot of real quick, hey, check-ins, 15 minutes. Let's just have a call and see how you're doing. Those things all really help.
Thank you. Svetlana, what are you seeing for your own individual leadership role as well as your team as far as these issues go?
I love the idea of the virtual drinks or some kind of informal opportunity to connect. So with my team, I'll ping them every morning just to say good morning. How are you? How did the meeting go yesterday? How was the offsite? It's a way to basically say, here's an open door, as if we were back in the office, to say, I'm present, I'm available, anything you want to chat about. So that's one. The other is I have regular one-on-ones, but on top of it, we, since the start of COVID, established virtual coffees. And the agenda is whatever it is, the paint in the back of the truck, the 4-year-olds who are misbehaving and refuse to get dressed despite the fact that it's cold outside, or my 13-year-old who decides she wants to play video games instead of do his homework. So the agenda is whatever it is. Sometimes it's processing work commitments or things that are getting in the way. Sometimes it's talking about politics and norms and coaching each other. So it's a free-flowing agenda. So things like that are really important. We're also looking at this as a time to utilize any downtime that may be there to see how do we not just survive, but thrive. So is there any professional development that we can do? So I just completed the Change Styles Indicator assessment and certification. We're looking at burst-in things and other ways to continue to develop, hopping onto conferences. So continuing to encourage that. And as well as reminding people to take the time off, going for walks, talking about plans for the weekends, really thinking about it holistically so that folks have a chance to re-energize themselves and come back with a renewed focus and energy and a zest for what it is that we're trying to accomplish and supporting and helping our leaders.
Thanks for that. I hope that's useful to the audience because, of course, everyone here is essentially in an LD leadership role. We've talked about the VUCA world that we're in, and my belief is that we're probably in for more of this in the next several years and maybe longer. And it's an opportunity for all of us to really reevaluate what's most important versus what's less important, and only really focus on what's most important. And specifically for businesses to get really clear about what their strategy is, first and foremost, and then communicate that down, and also help everyone map their day-to-day activities to the most important things that drive the key strategy that the organization is focused on. What are you seeing within your organizations as far as this goes? Like working, as I said earlier, working smarter versus working harder, but also being clear enough about the strategy, evangelizing the strategy, and helping people in a very practical, hands-on way as much as you can to map their day-to-day activities to the actual strategy and the most important priorities. Svetlana, if you wouldn't mind starting.
Sure. I think this is where we have to be really nimble and agile and make sure that we are prioritizing and reprioritizing and engaging in ruthless prioritization. And folks are working on the things that are the most impactful, the most relevant for where we are right now versus what we had set out at the end of the year. So we have agile goal setting. And that's what really we're encouraging our leaders to be doing with their folks, having conversations, figuring out what needs to be done now versus 2 or 3 months from now, and really supporting that, recommending offsites and start, stop, continue exercises, and kind of looking at what's the growing list of projects that continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and what's the best use of our time and resources.
And we also talked in our prep conversation about kind of continuous conversations to help as far as feedback goes, but also specifically for this topic, like how do we help people in their day-to-day get better at, again, mapping their day-to-day activities to the strategy and the most important aspects of that strategy.
Yeah, so one-on-ones, weekly one-on-ones, I think all the typical best practices for management come into play even more so, and making sure we're not losing focus of that as part of our agile approach to performance management. We also ask employees and managers to have quarterly check-ins. So there are constant opportunities to look back and look forward and to make sure that we're aligned and we're working on the things that we should be in the way that makes the most sense. So all of those components really play out.
Thank you. Brian, what's your experience in your organization?
So we're starting to see more leaders and encouraging more leaders to do, and I mean this at the top levels, to do more town halls with their functional organizations. Talk about what the priorities are, talk about the data that has informed these priorities, and then drive that down so that if the EVPs and SVPs are aligned, and then the AVPs and directors that are really driving the team effectiveness, that they've all heard the same message, and then the ones that are driving the work can really prioritize against that. So I think that's really helpful to make sure that those messages are heard top to bottom. rather than being more of a cascade, which is something that that has historically been the approach. It also gives an opportunity for employees to ask questions directly of, you know, the chief financial officer, for example. He did one earlier this week, and I think that engagement gets them to see at the upper levels what's front of mind for the employee base.
Thank you for that. And there's the sort of aspiration, if you will, of making sure we're all focused on the highest priority items that drive the strategy in the right kinds of ways. And then there's the day-to-day reality of everybody's lives that we've been touching on as well. It can be challenging for individuals to, and that's what it comes down to, is each individual's choices, and then that adds up to a collective outcome, to actually focus on the right things at the right time. And some of the things we talked about is human nature. We tend to focus on the things that are more comfortable first because it feels more comfortable. What are you thinking about? What are your thoughts about that as far as helping people get more comfortable with the uncomfortable so that they take on those difficult tasks that may be the most impactful tasks? Svetlana?
I think teaching and helping folks be comfortable with the ambiguity and stretching and growing, which is often uncomfortable, is really important. I think it's continuing to remind them we're all outside of our comfort zone. We're all inventing and kind of creating this as we go, and continuing to send those reminders and having leaders model that and model vulnerability for their teams becomes really important to kind of help create that learning organization and help us achieve new heights that we didn't even think we could.
Thank you, Brian.
And we're trying to get people to try the tactics, the actual functional things that that change behavior. So, for example, you know, close Outlook. By closing Outlook, you don't get those email reminders or the little pop-ups, hey, I have a new email, that drag you away from the thing you really don't want to do anyway. And so close it. This 45 minutes, I'm going to go do this thing that I don't really want to do, that's uncomfortable, or that I think is going to be difficult or bores me to tears, whatever that is. And because I don't have that distraction that pulls me away to go respond to email, you know, set your instant messaging tools to do not disturb for that 45 minutes, and go do the thing you've got to do that you don't want to do. And then turn those things back on. And I think that just having those functional tips really helps to get people to do something different. And then, you know, talk to your partners, your team, and, you know, how did it go? What worked well? Accountability partners are a great way to, yep, you said you were going to do it from, you know, 11 to 11:45. Did you really? Yeah, I got 60% done. Yay, congratulations.
Right. On the email tip, I think that's a really important thing to kind of underline. It's so easy when an email comes in to just look at it. I'll tell yourself, I'll look at it real quick. It'll be fast. I'll be right back to what I was doing. Next thing you know, you spent 15 minutes on something that really wasn't that urgent. And the task you were actually focused on before that email came in, you have to switch your mindset and in context in your brain back to what you were doing before. You probably lost a total of 30 minutes on something that wasn't actually that important in all likelihood. And so being mindful about how you relate to all the different ways in which you can interact with others. You, of course, have to pay attention to email, but do it mindfully. Carve out time in your day, say an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening, at the close of your day, to look at emails and respond as appropriate, and delegate what you can. And otherwise, don't pay attention, because it's so easy to get lost in that reactive mode of email. And reactivity in general is what causes us to focus on what's right in front of us versus what's most important to us.
And I agree. And using even the tools, you know, what are the mail rules you use that put things into folders so that you don't even have to think about it?
Right.
You know, maybe you get things from vendors that you're interested in, but they just clutter your inbox and they distract you. And a mail rule that says, you know what, everything goes here, and I'll go look at it once a week because I really don't need to look at it more frequently.
Right.
And it's out of your hair.
Right.
For those of us that have hair.
Let's touch on another topic, and we mentioned this earlier. It's I believe that in times of stress, we all tend to turn to our more reactive tendencies. And so for anyone who maybe struggles a little bit with being on the more controlling side or more micromanaging side as a leader, and many of us struggle with that, this situation confronts us with more triggers around that. We're more likely to micromanage because we can't see the person all day long. We're not in the office with them. We don't necessarily have the same kind of casual conversations as we walk by in the hallway or whatever. So we just kind of know what they're up to. What are your thoughts about that? What are you seeing within your organizations as far as helping leaders let go, or at least manage that need to control, and instead focus more on coaching and empowering people to get the job done themselves? And of course, holding them accountable for their results, but trusting them to get it done without looking over their shoulder all the time.
I think
Brian,
empowering and
go ahead.
trusting.
Go ahead, Svetlana.
I was going to say empowering and trusting are two such important words in that kind of challenge. Because for so many managers who want to see their people or know they're producing, know they're focused, when they can't, that can be quite scary. So it's how do you establish that relationship? How do you establish mechanisms for checking in, whether it's those morning pings or those afternoon touch bases? It may be a huddle every morning. What are your top priorities? What went well yesterday? What do you have going on for today or this week? That can be really helpful. And then using regular one-on-ones and those coaching questions. What are you proud of? Where do you need my help? Where are you getting stuck? What's getting in your way? Were you able to get to everything you wanted to? Why or why not? Those can be really helpful.
Thank you. Brian?
Really just pushing on the concept of ask versus tell. It is so easy. I've been in this role, or I've got 20 years experience, and I'm just going to tell. It's very disempowering. It's very frustrating for employees. They may have great ideas on how to do it better. And sometimes their ideas are not going to work, and that's okay too. My strong coaching to leaders is, even when you want to tell, ask permission to tell. Once you've said to them, hey, would you like some suggestions? And they say, yeah, because I'm not really sure how to approach this. Then you can lay out an idea, but you've got carte blanche to do that, rather than just coming in and going, you know what, this isn't getting done. You need to A, B, C, and D. Not that there aren't times when that is absolutely needed. But even that should be a conversation about why it's needed.
I think definitely defaulting to asking questions versus telling is so important, because when we tell someone what to do, although as you touched on, sometimes there's places where that's appropriate, but for the most part, we want to focus on asking questions because it empowers them. It also gets them the opportunity, more of an opportunity, to share their expertise and grow into the kind of person who can become better at that particular task. And part of that too, of letting go of control, is being willing, up to a point, of course, within certain business risk parameters, being willing to let people fail. Because sometimes when you give somebody a new task, they're going to fail, or partially fail at least. You have to manage the risk. You can't let everything fail, of course, but people learn so much more from failure than they do from success. And if you take that opportunity to have the chance to succeed or fail away from them by kind of directing them or taking the task over, you now limited their ability to growth, which ultimately limits you as a leader, because you're not scaling yourself as a leader.
Danielle,
Agreed.
Brian, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
I was going to say, Danielle, to go back to the point that you just made, I think the other really big business case for asking is sometimes when you're telling based on the data that you think you have, which may not be the whole picture. And oftentimes there's a reason why they're stuck, and there's a part of the equation that you just don't have. And so until you ask and really understand what's going on, what they've tried, what they haven't, what they're nervous about, it's very hard to tell in an actually helpful way. So another reason to make sure we're asking those really good questions.
Yeah, you could easily not have all the information that the person, your subordinate, has. And by design, you most likely should not have all the information they have, because you are delegating in the first place. So again, you need to coach them and work with them and sometimes give them direction. But for the most part, I want to encourage people to default to asking rather than telling. And that asymmetry of information that's likely to happen with your subordinate is important to recognize. Yeah.
I think that this goes back to that emotional intelligence also, as leaders become more aware of their gaps and stop feeling like they are the smartest person in the room. They become more willing to say, you know what, here's the outcome I want to get to. Now, let's talk through your approach without a whole lot of guidance. I can tell you when I have been willing to do that, typically the results are 10 times better than anything I could have outlined myself.
Brian,
This
so
is
that's,
saying,
that's
go ahead, Svetlana.
sorry, that's such an important point because the research around future work and what we're seeing from Burson and from other sources is talking about leaders as being connectors and facilitators. In some cases, we've grown up in jobs and we've done it. We've grown up vertically, so we know everything there's to know. But that's really changing, and we're now leading teams with folks whose jobs we've never done or touched or are brand new, or we've helped to design and craft and create, but we don't and can't know everything. So it's really about being a facilitator, removing those obstacles and helping set them up for success.
Yeah.
And now all of that's amplified by the VUCA world we find ourselves in. It's so apparent to so many of us now just the extent to which we're in the VUCA world, and it seems to be accelerating. My take on that is we're probably in for more of that, acceleration of that in the next 3 to 5 years, and maybe even longer than that. So if we could kind of look into your crystal ball and recognize that none of us is perfect at this, but if you looked ahead, what we see as the future of executive development, what are your thoughts as far as what's likely to happen in the next 3 to 5 years? Let's start with you, Brian.
I think that coaching, especially executive coaching, is going to blow up. I mean, it's just going to become huge. And in some cases, that's going to be traditional, but in a lot of cases, it's going to be, online driven. There's going to be, there's a few vendors out there that do phenomenal things. And using those types of tools that give people access to coaching and coaches at a much more reasonable price point, but more immediate activity too, because we aren't flying somewhere to meet a coach or scheduling an hour 2 weeks from now, but that we can do something more immediate. That's one area that I think will be much bigger.
What do you think the outcomes will experience as we have more coaching available to more people in the organization? How does that help us in the increasingly VUCA world we're in?
Svetlana said it. It's that agility and nimbleness, that ability to move quickly and change focus, and getting people to think broadly about that.
And being more comfortable being uncomfortable with uncertainty, being able to make decisions with imperfect and incomplete information that we all face all the time, even more so than ever now, and we're more aware of it as well. Svetlana, how about you? What are your thoughts about the future of executive development?
So I think definitely I'm seeing much more business in the executive coaching world. Danielle, I just reached out to you a few days ago and have another engagement I'll be reaching out about. So I think that is one for sure. I think there are a few others. I think one for organizations that don't have necessarily the dollars or the comfort level with executive coaching externally, it's building out the internal executive coaching practice, which really serves as a win-win for both L&D and HR in terms of increasing their skill set, helping them understand the business, but also giving more junior level leaders and executives more access to coaching and support that they normally wouldn't get. Another example is a colleague of mine is running a fantastic leadership development program and was supposed to have folks fly out to Henley, London, or Henley, England, just 2 weeks ago. Obviously, that's not happening. So instead, she sent everyone a virtual reality headset. And so they had 2 half-day sessions where they felt as close to being in the same room as possible. So I think looking at really creative and innovative ways to bring people together and foster that sense of connection, sharing of ideas, validation, and problem solving. So those are a couple of simulation, using avatars who can help folks how to have difficult conversations or simulate thinking about experiential learning and how do you make that happen in a virtual world. I think any and all of that are things that are coming down the pike and already being put in play for leadership development.
That's one of the things I'm seeing more and more of is the need for practical real-time learning in the moment as you're doing it, ideally with a coach or some other technology that can help you get the feedback and the learning you need right when you need it, because now you know you need it. It's immediate. You'll dive into it because you need the time to dive into it. Otherwise, we can be so distracted. But that practical hands-on translation, if you will, from again, aspirational goals versus the day-to-day activities is so important. And that practical coaching and other technologies really help to get people there, I would say. We're pretty much at the end of our time. I really appreciate the conversation, your participation. This is a lot of fun for me. I always enjoy these conversations. I learn all the time from it. So thank you for your time. And I want to hand it back over to Bobby. I want to be respectful of our time. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, we had a few more minutes. That I didn't want to rush you guys at all. It was fantastic discussion. I'm sure you guys could have gone for another 2 hours on there. We had multiple comments throughout the session. Some people were really appreciating Daniel the points about triggers. And there was a comment in here. I wanted to gauge your guys' thoughts on this as well about walking and coaching conversations. Are they still kind of a really good practice and done with earbuds, that kind of thing? Some people are kind of believing that the physical moving clears out the minds for better conversations. What are your thoughts on that?
I know a lot of our coaches will not default, but at least ask to go to a walking conversation. Of course, these days it's not face-to-face, it's virtual, but anytime you can get out of your head and into your body or into your heart, it gets you into a different perspective and it opens up new possibilities. So it's not always the right tool. You don't want to overuse that, but it's very helpful to get people in a different perspective and get some sun, because all of us are holed up in our offices for the most part.
Yeah, and there was another question posed earlier, and I'm not sure if it was completely addressed or not, but somebody was asking, how can you get the work to actually energize them?
So I'll jump in there. I think part of it is really making sure that we're focused on what the missions of our companies are. We're here to fulfill a promise. Insurance is about a promise. Nobody wants to pay for what we have. They really don't. They pay for it because they have to. And being able to say, at the end of the day, we have people who have had their worst day and we're here to help them through it. That can be very powerful as long as it's a message that's being carried from leader to leader all the way down the line.
Okay.
I'll just underline the connection to meaning and purpose is so important for finding work energizing versus draining. So that's really important.
And I think similar to that, I think part of it is making sure that it's aligning to a higher level objective or mission and vision, hopefully that we're completely bought into. I think the other is making sure that we're delegating the right work to the right individuals based on skill sets, growth opportunities, and things that they're passionate about, because that's really where they will excel and they will tackle it with their heart and soul.
And then coaching and empowering. I can talk about this for hours, but giving people the opportunity to lean into a task versus telling them what to do also really gives them finding more satisfaction in their work as a result.
All right. Thanks again, guys. As expected, it was a fantastic discussion about executive development. Sorry, we only had about 45, 50 minutes for it. Loved how all of you talked about the emotional intelligence needs of the executives and the challenges, of course, in today's VUCA world, the magic word there, where we're all kind of reevaluating what's truly most important to the businesses versus what's expendable. So again, everybody in the audience, this platform will be open until the 29th. So if you want to go back and get a few more pointers and some of the other great insight, feel free to jump back on the platform. It'll be available for another week and a half for viewing. So thanks again, Daniel, Svetlana, and Brian for joining us today. Loved having you on board.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.